Hello and welcome to KOFISI Connect, a podcast series connecting you to influential business leaders operating in Africa. I'm Georgia Webber, and today, in celebration of International Women's Day on the 8th of this month, I'd like to welcome Sophie Hodder, who's the Country Director of StopesKenya. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you.
MSK is the leading specialised sexual and reproductive health centre in Kenya, offering increased access to high-quality, affordable services to women across society in Kenya specifically. Sophie, it's 2022. Explain a little about the need for something like International Women's Day.
Yeah, so International Women's Day is about a number of things. It's about celebrating women. We know that women are amazing. They are basically the fabric of society and the glue. We give life, which is pretty amazing, but we also sustain that and keep all communities together and form so many different roles. And of course, now in 2022, so many more of us are working and trying to make that balance as well. So it's really important that we celebrate our role in society. But this year's hashtag is about breaking the bias. There is still a massive bias. I love the idea of this hashtag. There's still so much in everything we see, everything we do, the way the world is designed, policies that are made that are not thought about for women. So everything really needs to be thinking about the bias that is towards women nowadays. And International Women's Day is also around acknowledging the challenges that still exist. I mean, really sadly, if we look at Kenya, we have a huge amount of gender-based violence. That is actually throughout the world as well. In Kenya, half of Kenyans are defined as poor. And we know from a lot of the research that disproportionately affects women as well. There's still harmful practices like female genital mutilation that happens across society. And unsafe delivery of babies, unsafe abortion. I mean, half of pregnancies are unintended. So there's massive global disparity. So International Women's Day still, unfortunately, does have its place to highlight these gaps as well as celebrating women.
The hashtag Break the Bias is very sort of gender specific, which is something that this year the International Women's Day is going to focus on. How much more work is there to be done to create, I suppose, a gender neutral society, if that's possible?
Yeah, so at MSK, we're really looking at working for women. So we're looking at being with women throughout it all. So if we talk about what it is to be a woman for a minute. So you start your female journey as a little girl, and then you start your periods. Sometimes these are really heavy and uncomfortable and can prevent you doing sport and already become a challenge. In some societies, this even stops people being able to go to school. Then you go on as a woman and you have fertility issues potentially. You then go through childbirth and sadly sometimes an unwanted pregnancy or even an abortion. And in many cases, that's an unsafe abortion. And then it's not even over there. You then go through the menopause. But what we really try and do at MSK is be with women throughout the journey and making sure that we can support women throughout all of it.
And in your line of work, I suppose you are at the forefront because you offer frontline healthcare services. What sort of discrimination do you or your colleagues see, within society in your workday?
So I'm proud to say as an employer, we are really focused on women. We have predominantly female leadership. Obviously, I am the country director and I am a woman. And we have 70% of our senior leadership are female. And throughout the organisation, we're around 70% as well. So within our organisation, of course, we're not perfect. Nobody is. But that's something we hold really, really dear. But what we do see is throughout our clients particularly, there is a real challenge there. When women are poor, they are disproportionately affected and gender becomes a much bigger issue. They find it much harder to maybe have a say around family size, around choice in contraception, and are often having many more children than perhaps they would decide to. Again, like I mentioned before, gender-based violence is a huge issue as well. And really what we're trying to do is support women to have choice. It's really very challenging and it's really very sad to see, and we see it every day. We see the disparity is still massive. We see control of finances is a huge issue. We have different levels of services. We have clinics, which are private and you would come and pay, and we offer free services either through the public sector or through our outreach programs. And the reason we do that is to make sure that all walks of society are able to have choice and control of their own bodies. But we still see even getting permission sometimes from men is a challenge for women as well. So it's still a really major problem, and there's still quite a long way to go. And like I said, we see it every day in our work, particularly our frontline workers in our clinics. And they do a fantastic job at being very aware of this, but we have a long way to go.
And the perception of women's sexual health specifically is something that you focus on. Is Kenya behind other countries? Is it is something changing? What impact has MSK kind of had on women's sexual health?
So that's a really good question, comparing it with other countries. Kenya is very progressive in many ways. There are some great bills out there. Great work has been done around reproductive rights. There is wonderful civil society, and the government is also making great strides and really trying to make contraceptives widely available. A lot of our work is around contraceptives and offering post-abortion care services, but we also have maternity facilities. We also do antenatal care, and now we're more and more working around cervical cancer and breast cancer, HIV, different areas. So when you compare to other countries, there's some things that are going a bit better and some things that are not. That's the reality. There are, for example, if I take GBV, that is disproportionately higher in some communities within Kenya.
GBV being gender-based
violence,
yeah.
Yes, and so is female genital mutilation and other harmful practices like early marriage. So there's definitely some areas. We work really closely with the government on trying to improve those. Maternal mortality has had great progress, but there is still a long way to go. So it really depends on what the particular issue is. Kenya's certainly not really far behind, but I think everyone would acknowledge there's still some way to go.
What sort of difference is there in the sexual healthcare for women versus sexual healthcare for men? Is there any difference?
Yeah, I make a lot of jokes that if babies came out of a man's testicles, then the world would be very different. The way we gave birth would be very different. I mean, there's a biological reason why men don't have babies, and I don't think it's just our anatomy. I also just don't think they are set up for the level of pain. But then the converse of that is women are sort of expected that from your first period that is painful, and so we become used to it all the way through. And so really, when you look at Kenya, for example, we see pretty low levels of male contraceptive uptake. There barely exists globally male methods. There's vasectomy. There isn't a male pill. And really, that's not because it's not possible to do. That's for two reasons. One is we do believe that uptake would be very low. And generally, women have said they wouldn't trust a man who said he was taking a form of oral contraceptive pill or something similar. Of course, condoms are available, and there is decent uptake of condoms, but we would always recommend they're used as a dual method of protection anyway. But there is different focus on it. And when I say different, what I mean is a hypothetical. The situation would be very different if men were expected to take care of fertility, if they were getting pregnant. It's a really interesting, almost philosophical discussion about what it would be like. I really do believe the world would be a very different place, and sexual and reproductive health and rights would be very different if men were more affected. But the result is that a man can leave. If they've had too many children, if a man is struggling, they leave. Women don't. We've had the baby, and we are generally a lot more caring and stay around. And that is really one of the things that has left the situation the way it is, if I'm honest, but that's a very personal view.
More for another day, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
You've not just worked in Kenya, you've worked around the world, and I'd just like to find out a little bit of your experience on gender bias elsewhere in other countries.
Yeah, so the world around us is designed for men, like I was talking about before. I'm leading an organisation. I'm in a very lucky position. I absolutely love my job. But when you look globally, 27% of global CEOs are women. And why is that? Because women are clearly just as intelligent. I'm even a little bit biased to say we're even more intelligent. But, when you look at women, there's so many challenges, like we were talking about before. So we have a lot of women dropping out of school. Young girls dropping out of school due to unwanted pregnancies, for example. Girls are obviously sometimes not prioritised educationally in the family. If there's finite resources, often girls will have to stay home where boys still get to continue their education. Also, when we get to school, we're often told, we're not told that we can. Often there's an expectation that boys will go further. So there's a narrative from early age that girls cannot do what boys can do. And that's globally. That's in nearly every society, including even in the UK. And then there's even laws that make life more difficult for women, owning land, different things. So there's prevention across the whole warps of society. And then you sort of get married, your in-laws have got different expectations on you, you are expected to stay home after you've had a baby. So it really is very limiting. And then even when we get to the 27%, so 27%, some people would argue maybe that's not so bad. But really interesting fact is when you Google female CEOs, only 11% of the images are women. So even though we've hit the 27%, still Google would say we're only 11%. So the whole world is designed with men in place. We're more likely to get hurt in a car crash because seatbelts are designed for men. We get the wrong dosage of medicines because they are designed for men. Our phone doesn't fit our hand because they are designed for men. Even doorways are designed for men. It really is everything we look at, everything we see is from a male perspective. But what I am proud of is that MSK is really around choice. What we're really looking at is allowing just that small part of a woman's life, which has so much impact, to make sure that she at least has choice over her own body.
Now, on a more sort of personal note, just as a sort of a female, we're focusing on inspiring women because of it's International Women's Day. I suppose I'd like to know what challenges you've faced personally in your career as a woman.
So in many ways, I've had a very privileged upbringing. I had parents who stayed together, parents who helped me get a really good education through school, and I went to university. But when I got to university, I studied engineering, and while I was in one of the early lectures, I was one of 5 women out of 600 men on my course. Wow. Because I was doing engineering. And one of the lecturers pointed straight at me in probably about my 3rd week and said, "Why did you want to be an engineer?" And I was so stumped. I'm 19, I haven't got a clue. I'm not particularly eloquent, thinking, why is he singling me out? Before I'd even formulated a response, he said, "Why didn't you want to be an air hostess?" And that, of course, it's a horrible thing to happen in front of others. Of course, 600 boys think this is the funniest thing they've ever heard. And the 41-year-old me now thinks of all the millions of things I could have said back. But at the time, I was stunned. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. And of course, I thought, why am I here? Can I be here? This is obviously a boys' course. This is a man's course. Exactly. Yeah. So, I faced challenges like that all the way through. I then went to work for Rolls-Royce for a while, where it was pretty standard to have pin-ups of, in the UK we say page 3, this is basically women who are not wearing very much, and that's totally acceptable to have that pinned up in front of your desk. And it was a very sexist society. Now, for me, that really motivated me to think this isn't right. And at the time, we weren't having podcasts like this. We weren't talking about these issues. I wasn't listening to things like this. But the world is changing, too slow, to be honest. Mm. But that's sort of my personal story. And with MSK, it's not an issue. Working with MSI reproductive choices globally, women are a huge part of the future. And